2 years. That's how long I'd been building myself back up from the ashes of my own mistakes. Sobriety had become more than a daily decision. It was the architecture of my life now, cautious, deliberate, sacred. So when the company I'd been interning with decided to hire me, even reward me with a signing bonus, something strange bloomed in my chest, pride, a feeling I hadn't worn in years. I should have celebrated quietly, alone or maybe with Jordan, the only person who had seen the worst of me, and stayed anyway. But instead, I made reservations at Halcyon Sky, my parents' favourite rooftop restaurant downtown. The kind of place they only went to when someone else was paying. And I paid. I also booked a 4-day stay at Azure Bay Retreat, a coastal haven they'd once mentioned wistfully, a place out of reach for people like us. But I wasn't us anymore. I was me. I had changed. I thought maybe they could too. Maybe the gesture would bridge the gap. Maybe they'd see me now, the real me. I pictured my father, Richard, letting his usual critical squint soften. My mother, Margaret, maybe even smiling, for once not with suspicion, but something bordering admiration. Hope is a foolish thing, but that day I wore it like perfume. They were 7 minutes late. Of course they were. Richard led the way, checking his watch before acknowledging me with a terse, Emily. Not a greeting, just a sound, flat and clinical. Margaret followed, all perfume and tight disapproval, her expression pinched like she was bracing for disappointment. "This is unexpected," she said, scanning the rooftop dining room like someone awaiting the punchline of a cruel joke. I'd spent 3 days rehearsing my words, and yet, in their presence, my voice sounded smaller, thinner. "I wanted to celebrate," I began. "I got the job. Marketing. Full time." Richard raised one eyebrow, the one from last month. I nodded. Yes. "I started 2 weeks ago. Today was my first real paycheck." Margaret tilted her head. "And you haven't spent it all already?" The dig wasn't even subtle. It landed like a slap dressed up as a question. "I'm 2 years clean," I reminded her, gently, even though she hadn't asked. My father exhaled through his nose. "We've heard this before." And just like that, every brick I'd used to rebuild myself wobbled under the weight of their disbelief. "This time is different," I said, and I meant it. I had proof, after all, an embossed envelope in my bag and an itinerary printed on heavy paper. Margaret didn't ask what the job entailed. She asked how much the paycheck was. I told her. Richard scoffed. "That just about covers what your last rehab cost us." The air went out of my lungs like a punctured balloon. I blinked at him, unsure if I was supposed to laugh. Margaret nodded along. "Do you have any idea what we could have done with that money? The trips we gave up, the years we lost, that's when it hit me. This dinner wasn't a reunion, it was a reckoning." In their eyes, I wasn't a daughter. I was a debt, a line item in their list of sacrifices. I swallowed hard. "I didn't bring you here to talk about rehab," I said. "I wanted to show you I've changed." "And the fancy dinner?" Richard leaned back, voice dripping with contempt. "Is that part of the show?" He was louder now. A few heads turned. Margaret placed a hand on his arm, not to stop the cruelty, only to moderate the volume. I looked at them then, really looked. The people who had given me life, but couldn't give me love without conditions. Once a black sheep, Margaret sighed, always a black sheep. The words didn't pierce me the way they once might have. But they scraped something tender. The envelope in my purse suddenly felt foolish, like a child's drawing held up to critics who'd never appreciate it. "I need to use the restroom," I said, pushing back my chair. My voice didn't shake. My legs didn't falter. But something inside me had quietly shattered. The restroom at Halcyon Sky was all marble and mood lighting, the kind of place that invited you to believe in a version of yourself that didn't feel like an open wound. I stepped inside a stall, locked the door, and finally let myself exhale. My hands trembled. Not from fear, not even from anger. It was something else, the way your body reacts when your spirit realizes, finally and with certainty, that it's been clinging to a lie. I pulled the envelope from my purse, thick paper, elegant gold lettering embossed at the corners, Azure Bay Retreat. A 4-day escape of ocean breeze and quiet mornings. It was supposed to be a peace offering, a symbolic gift, not just of time but of effort. Proof that I'd risen from the wreckage. That I could give. That I was enough. But what good is a bridge if the other side refuses to meet you halfway? I sat there for what felt like an hour, envelope open in my lap. I didn't cry, didn't rage. I simply watched as the idea, the dream, unraveled. The fantasy of my parents seeing me, really seeing me, died quietly, not with screams or slammed doors, but with understanding. They didn't hate me. No, that would require passion. What they felt was more dangerous, detachment wrapped in judgment. To them, I was a project that never turned out right, a misprint in the family photo. They had invested more in their disappointment than they ever had in my potential, and I had allowed it. 2 years sober, a job I was proud of, a paycheck earned on merit, not mercy. And still, I'd gone crawling back to the same table, asking for a scrap of validation. I traced my fingers along the glossy photo of the resort brochure, turquoise water, white sand, palm trees frozen in soft wind. I imagined Margaret there, posing for the camera like a politician's wife. Richard on a beach chair, scrolling his phone, unimpressed by everything. What a waste it would have been. What a revelation it was. With deliberate motion, I tore the brochure in half, then in quarters, then again, until it fluttered like confetti into the small silver trash bin beside me. It didn't feel like loss. It felt like a quiet reclaiming. When I stepped out of the stall and met my reflection in the mirror, something about my face had shifted. Not harder, but clearer, as if some fog had burned away. I ran my hands over my dress, checked my lipstick, and walked back into the dining room with a kind of calm I hadn't expected to find. They hadn't ordered yet. Margaret was still scanning the menu with that signature blend of disdain and calculation. Richard looked mildly annoyed at how long I'd been gone. I didn't sit down. "I have an early meeting tomorrow," I said, placing enough cash on the table to cover my untouched appetizer, and then some. "Thank you both for coming." Margaret blinked. "But we haven't even ordered yet." "I've lost my appetite," I replied. Then I looked at Richard, square in the eye. No trembling. And I've already heard everything I needed to hear. And just like that, I turned and left. I didn't rush. I didn't look back. The city lights blinked around me like a constellation of small possibilities. The night air was crisp, a little sweet, like the world had been waiting for me to make this exit. Outside, I pulled out my phone and did the only logical thing. I called Jordan. "They were terrible, weren't they?" he answered without a hello, because he knew. He always knew. "Worse than I expected," I murmured, voice cracked around the edge. "And I expected bad." "Come over," he said, like a heartbeat. "I'll make hot chocolate, the kind with the little marshmallows." Just like he had after my first week sober, when the shakes wouldn't stop, and I didn't believe I could make it through the night without falling apart. But this time, I had a better idea. "How do you feel about a beach vacation?" I asked, eyes glancing up at the stars that barely pierced the city glow. "It's already paid for." There was a pause, not of hesitation but awe. Then, softly, like a smile on the other end of the line, You sure? I was. In the marrow of my bones. For the first time in a long time, I said, I really am. As your bay retreat was every bit as dreamlike as the photos, wide skies, water so clear it could read your soul, and an air that didn't carry weight, only warmth. For the first time in years, I didn't pack guilt with my swimwear. I didn't plan every minute hoping to impress. There were no invisible expectations trailing behind me like overstuffed luggage. Just me and Jordan. He stretched out on a lounger next to me that first morning, sunglasses crooked and already laughing at something on his phone. His curls soaked up the sun like they'd been waiting for this exact latitude. I still can't believe you brought me instead of them, he said, sipping something tropical and unapologetically absurd, pineapple, mint, and a pink straw. I glanced over my own ridiculous drink, a rainbow of sugar and frost that came with a tiny umbrella and a carved mango flower. Best decision I've made in years. And I meant it. 3 days in, and I hadn't checked my phone once for a message from Richard or Margaret. Not out of avoidance, but because I genuinely forgot to care. You're different here, Jordan said, sometime around noon on the second day. We were halfway through building a sandcastle like children with credit scores and unresolved trauma. Different how? I asked, half expecting a joke. He shrugged. Lighter. Like your shoulders aren't holding up the whole world anymore. I sat back, hands covered in damp sand, and considered that. He was right. I wasn't watching the horizon for something to go wrong. I wasn't calculating whether joy was allowed, or if I'd have to pay for it later in disappointment. For once, I wasn't performing. I think I'm just remembering who I was before, I murmured, before I became a walking disappointment. Jordan didn't flinch. He didn't try to correct the term. He just reached over and squeezed my wrist, his palm warm and solid. You were never that. You were just in the wrong audience. We didn't talk about it again. We didn't need to. Sometimes healing doesn't require words, just space. So we gave ourselves permission to fill that space with laughter, salt water, and an absurd number of selfies. We had cocktails by the pool, took snorkeling lessons, spent one entire afternoon floating in a quiet cove, drifting in and out of naps under the sun. And each day I took pictures. Not for proof, not to post. Just to remind myself, this is what freedom looks like. It looks like sunburned cheeks and windswept hair, like dancing barefoot at sunset because no one's watching. Like dessert after every meal and not once feeling like I had to earn it. On our last night, we dressed up for the resort's signature restaurant, white linens, candlelight, a live quartet playing something soft and elegant. I caught a glimpse of us in the mirror near the entrance and barely recognized the woman beside him. Skin kissed golden by the sun, lips curled in a smile she didn't have to rehearse. We look like we belong here, I whispered, as the hostess led us to our table by the window. Jordan raised his wine glass. We do belong here. To hell with anyone who ever made you think otherwise. To chosen family, I said. To finally choosing yourself, he added. We clinked glasses, and in that moment, I could almost feel something break free inside me, like the last link in a chain giving way. We didn't talk about my parents. Not then. Not the way they'd measured my worth in rehab bills and shame. Not the way they'd dissected my paycheck instead of my progress. Instead, we talked about plans, mine, his, ours. We daydreamed about opening a coffee shop together, or travelling, or just surviving the next winter without going entirely feral. We laughed so hard over our overpriced souffle that a woman at the next table offered to take our picture, mistaking us for a couple. We didn't correct her, because in that moment, we were something whole. When we returned to our suite that night, I slipped the photo into my journal, one of those little Polaroids the restaurant printed for special occasions. Not to frame, not to prove, but to remember. To remind myself that joy isn't borrowed, it's built. And I was finally learning how to do it brick by beautiful brick. The next morning, we packed slowly, neither of us wanting to disturb the soft glow that had settled over the past 4 days. On the plane home, Jordan slept with his hoodie up and a neck pillow shaped like a llama. I stared out the window, the clouds parting to reveal the distant blue-green ripple of the retreat as we climbed higher, and I knew, in the marrow of my being, that something had shifted. Not because I was healed, but because I was done waiting for permission to be. We'd only been back 2 days when my phone exploded. 17 missed calls, 23 text messages, 3 voicemails, all from Margaret, the same number I'd once programmed under Mum, long before it stopped feeling like the right label. I was in a meeting when the buzzing started, my co-workers glancing over with polite curiosity as I scrambled to silence it. My stomach had already dropped before I'd even seen the name. Panic is a muscle memory, especially when it's been trained by years of emotional minefields. Had someone died? Was Richard in the hospital? Had something happened that justified this? Barrage? I stepped into the hallway and pressed play on the first voicemail. Her voice, sharp and furious, cut through the speaker. Emily Claire Harper, don't you dare ignore me. After everything we've done for you, you think flaunting some beach vacation like that is appropriate? Do you even care what that looks like? Each message that followed was more venomous than the last. Guilt trips, accusations, a list of sacrifices recited like invoices. But it was the last one that twisted my breath. Jordan sent us the photos. Sunset shores? Are you dealing again? Tell me the truth. And there it was. Not worry, not concern, not even curiosity, but suspicion. They didn't believe I had earned anything, not the trip, not the happiness, not the right to move forward. They thought the only possible way I could live freely was if I had regressed, back to the version of me they'd always preferred, the mess, the addict, the cautionary tale. My fingers hovered over the call button, instinct still trying to mend what had long since snapped. But I answered, because I needed to hear it for myself. One last time. Hello? I said, already bracing. Her voice lashed through the line. How dare you, Emily? Just how dare you? We see you smiling in those photos, drinking God knows what, and not a single word to your family. My family? I asked. Cool and even. Or the people who only speak to me when they want something. Don't you twist this, she hissed. That resort was not affordable. I know what that kind of place costs. What kind of marketing job pays for all that? One that comes with a signing bonus, I said. Because I earned it. There was a long pause, the kind that always used to make me sweat, but I didn't sweat now. You're telling me, she said, voice shifting, softening in that eerie, transactional way you actually make that kind of money now. There it was, the shift, from fury to interest, from offence to opportunity, yes. Click. Just like that, the conversation had shape shifted. Well, she continued, we had no idea. You should have said something at dinner. This changes everything. I nearly laughed. Does it? I wanted to ask. Or does it just change what I'm worth to you? You know, your father and I never did get to celebrate our anniversary properly, with all the time and money we spent helping you get back on your feet. There it was, the unspoken request, dressed up in nostalgia, sugar-coated manipulation. I'm at work, Margaret. I have to go. Wait, don't hang up. We should do dinner again, a proper family dinner. Now that we understand your situation better. No, you don't understand me. You just finally saw dollar signs. I'll think about it, I said flatly. But I wouldn't. The moment I ended the call, I didn't move, just stood in that hallway, the weight of 2 decades pressing down like wet concrete. I'd waited my whole life for their love to feel unconditional, for their voices to sound like home instead of hurt. And it never came. That truth didn't crush me anymore. It clarified me. When I returned to my desk, I picked up my phone and I blocked Margaret, then Richard, then their shared email account. No grand gestures, no final speeches, just clicks, quiet ones. And with each click, I felt lighter. A message pinged from Jordan not 10 minutes later. Jordan, oh God, I didn't mean to tag you in those photos. Your mum is all over my comment section. Are you okay? I stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed back, me, I wasn't. But I think I'm going to be. That night, Jordan came over. He brought takeout, ice cream, and 3 printouts of our most ridiculous vacation photos. I'm so sorry, he said again, handing me a bowl overflowing with cookie dough and regret. I'm not mad, I said. Actually, it helped. He blinked. Helped? They only cared when they thought I had something to offer. And now I know. There's no more wondering. No more trying to earn something they don't have to give. Jordan didn't say anything at first. He just reached over and clinked his spoon against mine. To truth, he said. Even when it's ugly. To freedom, I added. Even when it hurts. We spent the night watching trash TV, laughing until our sides ached, the way only people who've survived something together can. Later, after Jordan left, I stood alone in my apartment, once a place I thought of as a compromise, now a place I chose. I picked up a photo of us at the resort, sun-kissed, ridiculous, alive, and I placed it on the shelf where the family portrait used to be, because family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who never ask you to prove your worth, who see it without question, who celebrate your light without comparing it to their shadows. That night, for the first time in my memory, I fell asleep without wondering if I'd ever be enough. I already was. I always had been. And no one, not even them, could take that away from me. Story 2. You ever have one of those moments where you're just done? That was me, sitting on the edge of my bed what used to be my bed, with my dad standing in the doorway like some medieval landlord. Arms crossed, eyes hard. He didn't knock, didn't even pause. Pack your stuff, Mason, he said. Logan needs the room. No warning, no discussion, just like that. Logan, my younger brother by 4 years, was leaning against the hallway wall behind him, that smug little half smile on his face. Classic Logan. Golden boy of the family. Ambitious. Reckless. Always just one idea away from making it big, and always dragging the rest of us through his personal financial disasters like they were group projects. He needed a proper space to work on his new startup, according to Dad, a real office. So of course the logical solution was to kick me, the boring older brother who plays it safe, out of the room. If only they knew. Because what Dad didn't realise, what none of them realised, was that I had bought the house 3 days earlier. Yeah, that house, our family home. The one they were trying to kick me out of. It had been quietly auctioned off due to unpaid mortgage debt. I caught the foreclosure notice last month while helping Mum look for some receipts. They never said a word, I just acted. While Logan was blowing through his 3rd failed startup, I was buying rental properties, quietly, 15 in total. This house, number 16. But I didn't tell them, not yet. Instead, I closed my laptop, the bank confirmation still glowing on the screen, and said, "Sure, I'll start packing tomorrow." Dad nodded, like he'd just solved a tough parenting dilemma. He left without another word. Logan strutted into my room seconds later, already talking about desk placement like this was a real estate tour. I think the window's best. Natural light for Zoom calls. Good call, I replied, deadpan. He didn't notice. He never does. He didn't know I'd paid the property taxes on this place. He didn't know I'd paid for the roof repair last winter. Or that the bank had accepted my offer last week and finalised the title transfer that morning. He definitely didn't know I had an attorney lined up for Friday. But I waited because this wasn't about revenge, not entirely. It was about boundaries, about making sure I never got bulldozed by my own family again. Dinner that night was lasagna, my favourite. Guess Mom thought a peace offering might help the bitter pill go down easier. I sat down across from her and Logan. Dad brought out the wine. We know this is sudden, Mum said gently, folding her hands like she was praying. But Logan really needs this space. Like the last time? I said, and yeah, I knew it came off cold. But I couldn't help it, Dad bristled. Your brother has vision. He's building something. We support him. And me? I asked, setting my fork down. The money I gave for the mortgage last year? The electrical repair I paid out of pocket. We appreciate everything you've done, Mum said, clearly uncomfortable. But Logan's got potential. Right, that word again, potential. I'd heard it so often, it sounded like a curse. Dad crossed his arms. If you can't support your brother, maybe it's time you moved out. Logan grinned. I didn't. Instead, I smiled, because they really had no idea. That night, I emailed my attorney, Marcus, to confirm our appointment for Friday evening. We'd meet at the house. Time to settle everything. For the next 2 days, I played the part, packed up boxes, let Logan start moving in his gear monitors, ergonomic chairs, some fancy soundproofing panels I knew he couldn't afford. Probably on Mum and Dad's credit card again. They avoided me, mostly. I think they believed they were doing the right thing. Maybe even hoped I'd find freedom somewhere else. But I overheard them Thursday night, whispering in the kitchen while they thought I was asleep. Mason's taking it better than I expected, Mum said. Dad grunted. Maybe this'll finally push him to take some risks. Logan laughed. He plays it safe. Always has. Honestly, I'm doing him a favour. I stood in the dark hallway, hands in my pockets, silent, calm, and grinning, because I had the deed. Friday morning I woke up early, shaved, put on my best suit, the one I usually reserved for property closings. I walked downstairs and Mum blinked. You look sharp, she said, puzzled. Big day? Something like that, I replied. By 5:45 that evening, I was back at the house, title deed in my briefcase, and Marcus already on his way. When I walked inside, Logan was directing 2 movers who were hauling my bed into the garage. Oh, hey, he said. I figured I'd get a head start. I adjusted my tie. Actually, I think we should hold off on the move. Marcus is coming over. Logan frowned. Who's Marcus? The doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Marcus impeccably dressed, briefcase in hand. He smiled. Evening, Mason. Ready? Mom appeared from the kitchen, eyes darting nervously between us. What's this about? Legal stuff, Marcus replied smoothly, regarding the house. Mom paled. Logan's jaw twitched. Before they could ask more questions, Dad pulled into the driveway. Perfect timing. When he stepped through the front door and saw all of us, me in a suit, Marcus holding legal folders, Mom looking like she'd seen a ghost, his expression shifted from confusion to suspicion. Mason, he asked. What the hell's going on? Marcus stepped forward. Mr. Thomas, he said formally. I'm Marcus Reed, Mason's attorney. We need to discuss the ownership status of this property. Dad actually laughed. You've got to be kidding. Mason doesn't own anything. He's an accountant. I met his eyes, dead calm. Actually, I do. And not just anything. I own this house. You could have heard a pin drop. Logan laughed first. Come on, seriously. You bought the house? With what? Your tax refunds. Marcus didn't flinch. He pulled out the foreclosure paperwork, the auction certificate, the title transfer, all notarized and binding. This home was foreclosed on 3 weeks ago due to outstanding debt. Mason purchased it at auction. Dad's face drained of colour. He grabbed the papers and scanned them, hands trembling. Mum sat down, hands covering her mouth. No, this isn't possible. Logan still didn't get it. You're bluffing. You don't have the money. 15 rental properties, I said quietly. This is number 16. Dad looked up at me like he was seeing me for the first time. How long? He asked. 6 years, Logan exploded. So what? You're kicking us out? I shook my head. I'm not heartless. But if you want to stay here, you'll sign a lease, like every other tenant. Are you serious? Mum whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. To your own family? I stared at her, steady and calm. You kicked me out of my room without blinking. You spent my money. You never even asked. This isn't revenge. This is reality. Marcus slid the lease agreements onto the coffee table. Rent is set below market rate. You have 30 days to sign or vacate. Dad looked like he'd aged 10 years in a minute. Logan stared at the paper like it had bitten him. And I finally felt free. So there we were, my parents and brother sitting in the living room, silent as stone, the lease agreement lying right there on the coffee table like a snake in the grass. Nobody moved. I could almost hear their thoughts racing, trying to find an escape, a loophole, a way to make this all go away. Honestly, it felt weird. I always thought if I ever got the upper hand, I'd feel triumphant. Instead, I just felt tired. I hadn't slept much all week, and now all those years of being overlooked and dismissed seemed to hang in the air. Logan was the first to snap. He stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. You can't actually do this. It's our house. No, I said, keeping my voice steady. It was our house, but you lost it. I just made sure we didn't end up on the street. He stared at me, eyes wide, like he was seeing a stranger. Mum just sat there, hands knotted in her lap, tears welling up but not falling. Dah! He kept flipping through the paperwork, searching for some magic word to undo it all. Finally, Dad spoke. You're really going to charge your own family rent? After everything? I took a deep breath. I'm not out to hurt anyone, but I won't let myself be used anymore. I offered you a fair deal, cheaper rent than anyone else would get. Stability, all I want is respect. That word hung between us. Respect, it felt like a foreign language in our family. Logan scoffed. Respect? You blindsided us, man. You were supposed to be the boring one, the safe one. I got tired of being invisible, I said. No one said anything after that. The air was heavy like a summer storm just before it breaks. For the next week, the house was a minefield. Nobody yelled, nobody slammed doors, but the tension was thick enough to choke on. Logan barely left his new office formally, my room, blasting music and muttering about betrayal. Mum wandered from room to room, cleaning things that didn't need cleaning. Dad kept to himself, sometimes shooting me dark looks, sometimes just staring out the window. Me, I worked from the kitchen table, checked emails for my rentals, tried to keep things running smoothly, but every meal was awkward. Every step in the hallway felt like walking on eggshells. One night, I caught Mum crying quietly in the laundry room. She didn't see me. For a second, I wanted to go in, say something comforting, but I didn't know what to say. I was still angry, still hurt. It's funny how, when you finally stand up for yourself, you start noticing all the little wounds you've been ignoring. Like how every family decision was about Logan's dreams, never mine. Or how my own birthday got skipped 2 years running, but we threw a party every time Logan hit a milestone. I guess I had always hoped things would change on their own, that if I just worked hard and played nice, someone would notice. Turns out, sometimes you have to draw your own line in the sand. A few days after the big reveal, Dad found me at the dining table, running spreadsheets. He looked tired, older than I remembered. He sat down across from me and stared for a long moment. "I checked the rental market," he said. His voice was rough, like gravel. "You're charging us way less than you could." I nodded. "I know." He looked away, hands folded on the table. "Why?" I shrugged. "Because I still care, even after everything." He was quiet for a long time. "You did good, Mason." I almost didn't hear him. I'd waited most of my life to hear those words, but when they finally came, they felt bittersweet, like an apology and an admission all rolled into one. We sat there in silence. Not friends, not enemies, just family, trying to figure out what came next. Logan, meanwhile, was having a meltdown. He stormed down the stairs one morning, waving his phone. "This is ridiculous. I can't believe you're treating us like tenants." "Me? Your brother?" I leaned back, tired but calm. "That's how it works, Logan. When you live in someone else's house, you pay rent." He glared at me, like I'd betrayed him. "This is still my home," I shrugged. "It's a roof over your head. You want to stay, you sign. You want to leave, that's your choice." He stomped away, muttering. But I knew he'd sign. Where else was he going to go? His latest business idea was already failing. The guy could barely pay for gas, let alone rent in this market. Mum was the last to sign. She did it with shaking hands, looking up at me with watery eyes. "I just wish we'd seen you for who you really are, Mason." I wanted to say something, anything, to make it easier. But the truth was, I needed them to feel this. I needed them to understand that I was done being invisible. She slid the lease back to me, her voice small. "I hope you'll forgive us someday." Maybe I would, maybe not. I guess time would tell. Once the papers were signed, Marcus came by to collect them. He gave me a nod, proud, like an older brother. "You did what you had to do," he said quietly. After he left, the house felt different. Not better, not worse, just different. I wasn't the one being pushed around anymore. I had drawn my line, and for the first time, they respected it, even if they didn't like it. Logan stayed mostly in his room. Dad buried himself in paperwork. Mom tried to keep the peace. And me? I finally slept soundly for the first time in years. But if you're expecting a fairy tale ending, don't. Family is messy. Old wounds don't heal overnight. Sometimes all you can do is hold your ground and wait to see what happens next. A couple of weeks passed. The tension didn't vanish overnight, but it settled into something quieter, less like a battle, more like coexistence. No more shouting, no more passive-aggressive comments. Just 3 people learning how to live under a new reality, where I wasn't the one getting steamrolled anymore. Logan finally signed the lease. Didn't look at me when he did it, just scribbled his name, shoved the paper back at me and walked away. That's when I knew, for the first time, he understood I wasn't bluffing, that I wasn't the pushover he'd always assumed, that I wasn't the extra in the movie of his life anymore. Funny thing is, once the dust settled, life got quieter, maybe even better. I started eating breakfast in the kitchen again. Dad would be reading the paper, Mom sipping her tea. Logan scrolling on his phone, pretending none of this had happened. But it had. And deep down, we all knew it. One afternoon, I got home early from checking on one of my properties. I walked in and saw Dad standing in the hallway, holding a photo, one of those old family pictures from when we were kids. He didn't hear me at first. When he noticed me, he cleared his throat and put the photo down like I'd caught him doing something wrong. I was just looking, he said, a little sheepish. Yeah, I said. We were pretty young in that one. Things seemed easier back then. I nodded. They were for Logan. Dad cracked a smile at that. Not a big one, just enough to let me know he heard the truth in it. He looked at me for a long second. You ever going to forgive us? I don't know, I said honestly. I'm not angry anymore, but I'm not the same either. And that was the truth. I wasn't doing this to hold a grudge. I just couldn't go back to being the guy they leaned on without ever looking at. That bridge had already burned. What I was building now, boundaries. Logan eventually started talking to me again, though it was mostly surface level. Where'd you get this chair from? Or Wi-Fi's slow today? Stuff like that. But then one evening, he showed up by the back door while I was out grilling. Can I ask you something? He said. Awkward, hands shoved into his hoodie. Sure. Did you always plan this? Like buying the house? I looked at him. Not exactly. I planned to protect myself. Owning the house just became part of that. He nodded slowly, like he was piecing something together. I didn't think you had it in you. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. After a minute, he said, I messed up. I know that. I just thought, I don't know, that I mattered more. There it was. Finally. A little crack in the ego. You mattered, I said. You still do. But so do I. He nodded. Didn't say anything else. Just sat there while we watched the grill sizzle. Maybe that was our version of an apology. A few months later, I started thinking about moving out, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I'd proved my point. I'd kept the house out of foreclosure. Set the boundaries, reclaimed my voice. But this place wasn't mine emotionally anymore. Not really. It was too tied up in old memories and years of silence. So I bought a small condo across town, quiet neighborhood, great light, near my favorite cafe. It felt peaceful. When I told my parents I was leaving, they didn't try to stop me. They didn't guilt me. Dad just nodded and said, It's a good place to start fresh. Logan didn't say much, just helped me carry boxes into the car. And when I left, Mum hugged me tighter than she had in years. Stay in touch, she whispered. I will, I said, and I meant it. So now I live alone, still running my properties, still working the same job that everyone once called boring. I drink my coffee slow in the mornings. I go for walks without needing an excuse. I don't wait around for someone to acknowledge my effort. And yeah, we still talk, not every day. Sometimes a text from Dad about the furnace. Sometimes Mum calls to tell me about a new recipe. Logan sends memes, go figure. We're not perfect. We're not close. But we're trying. And sometimes that's enough. What I learned from all of this is simple. Standing up for yourself doesn't always feel like a victory parade. Sometimes it feels like loneliness or silence or second guessing. But then one day you realize you're sleeping better, breathing easier. And when someone tries to push you out of your own life again, you know they can't, because you took the wheel back. And this time you're the one setting the terms. Final thought. If you're ever the quiet one, the reliable one, the one no one checks in on because you seem fine, remember this. Your silence is not consent. Your kindness is not weakness. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not scream, but own the house, literally or metaphorically. Just own it. Story 3. When I moved back in with my parents, it wasn't supposed to be long-term. A couple of months, tops. Just enough time to regroup after everything I'd worked for came crashing down. I'd just shut down my small creative agency, a business I built from scratch and poured 3 years into. I was 29, broke and raw. My girlfriend of 5 years had peaced out 2 weeks after the final client invoice was sent. Said she needed stability, whatever that meant. So I packed what was left of my life, 2 suitcases, a laptop, and the kind of hollow pride you carry when you've been gutted but still pretend you're fine, and headed to my parents' place in northern Connecticut. It hadn't felt like home since I was 19, but at least it was familiar. I showed up quiet, low impact, helped with groceries, fixed leaky faucets, cleaned gutters, stayed out of the way. My room still had my old posters, now faded and curling at the edges. I kept to myself and barely spoke at dinner unless someone pulled me into conversation. What they didn't know was that I had a fallback plan. In the back of my closet, hidden behind old shoeboxes, sat a compact black safe. Inside, just over $19,000 in cash. I'd been quietly saving for years, birthday money, freelance gigs, stock dividends, little wins that added up. That was my never again fund. The parachute, just in case life threw me into freefall. 6 weeks after I moved back, my mum decided to throw a big family reunion, one of those burgers and lawn chairs affairs where no one remembers half the names but everyone pretends to care. My dad manned the grill, my mum made 3 too many casseroles, and in rolled my younger brother, Chase 22, and freshly accepted into some overpriced, barely accredited business program in Vermont. Chase was always the golden child. Where I got, you need a real job, he got, follow your dreams, sweetheart. At the reunion, he hugged me weirdly long, like uncomfortable long, almost like an apology without words. I didn't get it at the time. That night, after everyone had cleared out and the house went quiet, I walked upstairs and instinctively checked the safe. No real reason, just something felt off. It looked untouched. I entered the code, heard the beep, pulled the handle. Empty. I froze, closed it, reopened it. Nothing. Not even the papers I had tucked inside. I started tearing through the closet like I was missing something obvious, but deep down I already knew. It had been taken. Footsteps. I turned around and there was my dad, leaning against the doorframe with a coffee mug like this. Was just another Tuesday morning. We had a vote, he said, totally calm. It didn't feel right having you live here for free, so we put the money toward Chase's tuition. I just stared at him. Words didn't come immediately. He said it like they did me a favor, like I should be proud to contribute. I told him what he did was theft, that I'd call a lawyer, that it was illegal. His response? He smiled. You won't do anything, he said, sipping his coffee. But I did. And I made sure it hurt. The next morning I was gone before sunrise, duffel bag, laptop, and one very important folder I'd never thought I'd need. It contained documentation for a modest trust left by my grandfather. Not much, just under $40, but it had one clause. Any family member who attempted financial manipulation against me triggered an automatic legal audit. It had never come up. Until now. I headed north, driving straight to my Uncle Ron's cabin in the Vermont woods. Ron was the family outlier, quit corporate finance a decade ago, built a solar-powered cabin from scratch, and told the world to leave him the hell alone. I hadn't seen him in a couple years, but I knew if anyone would get it, it was him. When I pulled up, he was already on the porch, nursing a chipped mug of black coffee and wearing a sleeveless hoodie in 50-degree weather. No questions, just nodded toward the guest room. The next morning, over sausage and eggs on tin plates, I told him everything down to the smug look on my dad's face. Ron didn't say anything at first. Just lit a cigarette, even though I was pretty sure he'd quit years ago. "You still have Grandpa's trust file?" he finally asked. I nodded, pulled it from my backpack. He disappeared into the cabin and came back with a dusty folder of his own. Inside, a signed IOU from my dad, $19,000 borrowed in 2014. "Never repaid. I'm tired of waiting," Ron said. We made 3 phone calls that night. One to the lawyer who managed the trust, one to the accountant who never liked my dad, and one to an old friend of mine in Boston, real estate lawyer, obsessive paper trail guy, owed me a favor. By noon the next day, the wheels were in motion. I didn't call home, didn't need to. Chase did. 6 times, followed by frantic texts. My mum tried too. Left voicemails crying, saying I was overreacting, that I was tearing the family apart. My dad? Radio silence. I stayed put. Helped Ron clean out his garage. That's when I found it an old VHS labelled Summer 2003. I popped it into a dusty combo player we dug up from a shelf. It was a campfire scene. My dad, half drunk, bragging to some uncles about how easy it was to shuffle money kid to kid without leaving a trail. One line stuck with me: if I ever needed to, I could drain their savings and they wouldn't even notice. I digitized it that night, sent a copy to my lawyer, then mailed a USB to my mum anonymously. 3 days later, she called sobbing, said everything was unraveling, that I had to stop. I didn't answer. Uncle Ron just sipped his coffee and said, "Let's make it really hurt." Once the trust lawyer got rolling, things moved faster than I expected. He confirmed what I hoped. My parents had tripped the clause in Grandpa's trust. They'd committed financial abuse by taking my money without consent, and that opened every dusty closet door they'd been hiding things in. The lawyer filed an official audit request. Within 2 days, a forensic accountant was assigned to investigate the trust's financial activity. Every transaction, every asset my parents touched under Grandpa's name, even stuff they thought was buried. It wasn't just about my $19,000 Sannymore. The whole estate was in play. Turns out they'd leased their fancy SUV using Grandpa's old line of credit. The vacation home in Rhode Island, also tied to trust money. The accountant flagged everything. My parents got hit with certified mail that probably felt like a bomb. I didn't call them. I didn't need to. Instead, I opened a folder I hadn't looked at in years. Tyler C. Holdings. A shell company I'd set up during my startup days as a joke. It had a real tax ID and a bank account all under the name of my brother, Chase. Why his name? Long story. Short version, we were testing branding ideas once, and I opened it with his info just to mess around. I hadn't touched it in years, but someone had. There were small deposits, $200 share, $600 steer, timed suspiciously close to the dates Chase was applying for financial aid. I dug deeper. One line caught my eye. A transfer for $6,300 labeled startup rollover. It was mine. From my old business account. The same month I'd shut everything down. That's when it clicked. They used the shell account to funnel part of my money and make Chase look financially independent. That way he'd qualify for more grants and loans. Smart if you're a criminal. I took screenshots. Compiled every deposit, every timestamp, every memo. Then I filed anonymous reports with Chase's school and the Department of Education. The documents didn't lie. By the end of the week, Chase's financial aid was frozen. His classes were put on hold. He was told to vacate campus housing until further notice. That same night he called me 6 times. Then came the texts. Bro, I didn't know, this isn't fair. You're ruining everything. I didn't respond. Because he didn't say a word when they stole from me. He let them do it. He benefited from it. That was his choice. Uncle Ron and I weren't done. We drew up a formal demand letter for the IOU my dad had written to him in 2014. We added 10 years of interest. Filed it with the county clerk. That meant we could legally place a lien on my parents' home, the new house, not the one I grew up in, the one they bought after Dad's big promotion, the one they were quietly preparing to sell and retire south. Too bad. The lien froze the property. No sale, no refinance, nothing. 2 days later, I drove by the house. Just wanted to see, not interact. Just observe. A moving truck was in the driveway, but no one was loading it. My dad was pacing the lawn, yelling into his phone like a man whose plans just caught fire. My mum sat on the porch, face in her hands. Chase stood by the car, shoulders slumped like someone had knocked the air out of him. That car-black Mercedes SUV. The one they said was a graduation gift? Registered under Chase's name, filed on his student aid paperwork as college transportation, but it was co-signed by my dad. I took that info and filed a separate tip to the IRS. Misuse of funds, undeclared assets, co-signed debt falsely linked to student aid. That same week I got word their accounts were flagged for audit. The IRS was now involved. But I wasn't done. There's a local blog in New Haven that loves stories about family scandal and money drama. Small but loud. I sent them everything anonymously. The VHS clip of my dad joking about stealing from his kids. The trust documents, the student loan fraud summary, a copy of the lien. They ran the story under the headline, Connecticut Family Under Investigation for Financial Abuse and Estate Fraud. It blew up. A regional news site picked it up the next day. Then someone posted it to Reddit. And that's when it spread like wildfire. People connected the dots. A former co-worker of my dad's dropped into the comments and said their company was looking into certain irregularities. My dad was suspended by Friday. My phone buzzed with a message from Chase. "Why are you doing this?" I didn't reply. But if I had, I would have said, "Because you watched them do it to me." And you said nothing. Uncle Ron opened a bottle of bourbon that night, poured us each a glass and handed me mine like it was a medal. "You're just getting started," he said. And he was right. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about finishing what they started. 3 days later, Ron got a call from one of his old contacts at the probate office. My dad had filed a petition claiming the trust was being mismanaged. He wanted the whole thing reopened, said Grandpa's will was flawed. Ron laughed so hard, I thought he might pull something. "He's bluffing," he said, "and he's going to walk straight into his own trap." Because what Dad didn't know was that I still had footage from Thanksgiving 2007. Home video. My dad, tipsy again, bragging about moving untaxed consulting income through the kids' accounts to avoid IRS reporting. He said on camera that he opened a savings account in my name I never knew about. I digitized that footage too, sent it directly to the IRS agent already handling the audit. But the nail in the coffin wasn't him. It was my mum. I was digging through old records from the Tyler Seashell account, trying to line up all the funny transactions. And that's when I found them. Transfer after transfer, $250 share, $320 steer from her personal account. Labelled things like school costs and Chase tuition emergency. The pattern was clear. She had helped disguise Chase's finances. Not just once, for over a year. She wasn't passive. She was active. When the university saw the full report, they didn't just suspend Chase, they expelled him. Fraud. Financial aid revoked. Record flagged. No appeals. Then one afternoon, Chase showed up at Ron's cabin. I didn't expect him. He looked different, pale, smaller. We stood in the gravel driveway. neither of us talking for a while. Ron stayed inside, giving us space. Finally, Chase asked, "Do you hate me?" I shook my head. "No, I just don't care anymore." He nodded like he understood. Then he said, "I found something in Dad's desk. Thought you should see it." He handed me an envelope. Inside was a typed letter dated 2010. It was from my dad to Grandpa. It was a confession. He'd borrowed $2,500, promised to repay in 5 years. Never did. The letter ended with, "Please don't tell Alex or Ron. It'll destroy what's left of this family." I stared at those words for a long time because it was never about the money. It was always about control, image, power. And now they were losing all of it. Uncle Ron read the letter later that night, slid it across the table and said, "Your dad's not just a liar, he's a coward." Then he looked up and added, "You want to end this? I've still got one more move." And what he told me next? That's when everything changed. After Chase left, I sat on the porch with that letter in my lap for a long time. It wasn't the dollar amount, it wasn't even the confession. It was that last line, "If you tell Alex or Ron, it'll destroy what's left of this family." My dad had been playing the same game for decades, hiding behind smiles, acting like he was doing what was best, when really he was just afraid of being seen for who he was. I didn't feel angry anymore, just done. Uncle Ron poured us a drink that night. He slid over a thin manila envelope with a smirk and said, "One last card." Inside was a bank record I hadn't seen before, not from our main bank in Connecticut. This one was out of New Jersey, same banking system, different state, different branch. The name on the account, Chase, but the money $19,426.88. Labeled Education Disbursement Reserve. I traced the routing number, found out the account had been created about 6 weeks after I moved home. It wasn't aid money. It wasn't scholarship cash. It was mine. My stolen savings transferred through layers, hidden under new names, and parked in a holding account, just in case. Like they were going to use it properly over time, and I'd never notice. So I made one more move. We filed a claim for restitution backed by the trust clause, the original safe theft, and the paper trail. But we knew that would take time. Court processes don't run on justice. They run on paperwork. So I showed up at my parents' house, unannounced. I wasn't there to yell. I didn't want drama. I wanted resolution. My mum opened the door. She looked tired, older. Like the last month had aged her. I asked for Dad. He came to the doorway, arms crossed, like a man trying to hold his pride together with Scotch tape. I told him I knew where the money was. I told him he had 2 choices: return every penny within 48 hours, or I file a civil theft suit, pursue criminal conversion, and drop the rest of the footage to the press. No threats, no raised voice. Just facts. He said nothing. I left. 2 days later, a wire hit my account. Exactly $18,000. No message, no signature, just numbers. Uncle Ron raised a glass that night. Said, "A little less than owed, but more than deserved." And he was right. But it wasn't over. That same night at 2 a.m., I got a text from my mum. "He's going to post about you." At first, I didn't understand. Until I woke up to texts from old classmates, a co-worker, even my ex. Someone had found a post on Reddit on one of those parenting subreddits. Title? "Our son stole our lives. Parents beware." It was a 2,000-word rant from a throwaway account, full of twisted half-truths and outright lies. Said I was a freeloader, ungrateful, mentally unstable. That I'd come home broke, taken advantage of their kindness, and launched a personal vendetta when they tried to help my brother. He even claimed Uncle Ron brainwashed me. I didn't respond. Didn't need to. Reddit tore it apart. Within hours, someone linked the news story. Others dropped screenshots of the trust investigation. It snowballed. The post got deleted by the afternoon. I saved everything, just in case. But that was the final straw. The next week, I changed my last name. No fanfare, just paperwork and a quiet walk out of the county office. I moved into a one-bedroom in New Paltz. It wasn't fancy, just a third-floor walk-up with creaky steps and a drafty heater. But it was mine. I bought a used couch, set up my speakers, played the same jazz record on loop for a week, sat on the floor and let the silence soak in. No texts, no voicemails, no cameras in the driveway, just quiet, just me. I blocked every number tied to their house, changed my email, set up a backup identity for anything legal. I didn't leave a note, just one locked file on my laptop titled, "If I ever need to remember." Inside was a sentence, "You taught me to fight, and then forgot that I could." Weeks passed. I got a new job doing consulting work remotely. Not flashy, but steady. I started biking again, grew basil on the windowsill, relearned how to sleep through the night. But Uncle Ron, he wasn't quite finished. One day he sent me a letter in the mail. No return address. Just my new name, written in his handwriting. Inside was a simple message. You didn't burn the house down. You lit a match and walked away. Let them live in the smoke. That was all. I smiled. Because he was right. I didn't take revenge out of spite. I didn't tear things down to feel powerful. I defended myself because no one else did. And when it was done, I didn't wait for apologies. I didn't need their guilt. I had truth. And peace. They still live in that house now, half empty, audited, frozen, and echoing. Chase is working part-time at a print shop in town. We haven't spoken since that last driveway conversation. My mum started applying for jobs again. My dad shaved his beard. I don't know why that last part matters, but it does. Maybe he wanted to look like someone else. Or maybe he couldn't look at the man in the mirror anymore. I don't feel sorry for them, but I'm not angry either. They made their choices, and I made mine. If anyone ever asks what happened between me and my family, I just say this: they voted to take from me. I decided to take it back, and now we all live with the results. And that's enough.